Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and we are stacked up to bring you a bunch of that summer reading. So let's go around and see who is all coming in to add a lot to that to-be-read pile. So, Ms. Colton, you are up first.
Hi, I'm Ellis Colton. I write romance, in particular contemporary and paranormal, which is what I'm here to talk about tonight.
Layla Dorine.
Hi, I'm Layla Dorine. I write LGBTQ fiction and romance, including Polly, Polly, Polly. And I'm here to talk to you about my newest book.
Jenny.
Hi, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series. I also write in a variety of other animals and in all lengths and genres. And I'm here tonight to talk about two of the new re-releases in the Alien series, Alien in the Family and Alien Proliferation.
Ms. Reyne, so that I can screw up which Layla I'm pointing at the time.
Hi, I'm Layla Reyne. I write queer romance, a little bit of romantic suspense, contemporary romance, and paranormal romantic suspense. And I'm here to talk about Atlas and the Traitor, which is book 3 in my Soul to Find series, which just released.
Allie?
I am Allie Temple. I write queer romance and fantasy, and tonight I'm going to be talking about my new book, Hate to Haunt You, which is book 2 in the Afterlife Incorporated series.
Sammie?
Hi, I'm Sammie Trinidad, and I write romance as well, fantasy and contemporary. And today I'm here to talk about my spicy contemporary romance that just came out in February. It was technically my debut novel. So exciting. And this is my Princess Wave.
And Mark.
I'm Mark West. There's a line from Sesame Street that says, one of these things is not like the others, and I am the one of these things. It's not like the others because I'm an academic, so I write scholarly books, and I have a new book, co-edited book, that's coming out next week. It's called Once Upon a Toy, and it's a collection of essays about the interplay between toys and stories.
So let's start with kind of the big picture, right? The premise of the books we're talking about, the worlds, all the kind of good stuff we're stepping into. So Ellis, walk us into this series.
This is book 2 in my paranormal contemporary series called Adventures in Love and the Paranormal. Book 1 was The Case of Thistledown House, came out last fall. This is book 2. We're following our 2 intrepid heroes, Zeke and Ian. In book 1, they had to explore a haunted house that people were dying in strange ways, including by a rug cleaning machine. In book 2 here, we're seeing them continue their adventures and the relationship that they started at the end of book 1, Case of Thistledown House. So here we are, they're in a new adventure. It might have something to do with the ocean and maybe a lighthouse. And it's in a world with magic and monsters, and they're out to save people and hopefully stop them from getting killed. But of course, there's always a couple people getting killed that has to tell them there's something that has to be put down. And so they're off on another adventure, rocking and rolling through the countryside.
Ms. Dorine, which one are we into this time?
It is A Little Campfire Blues, and it is this year's Pride Camp story. It comes out on the 27th, so just 10 days away. And this is taking place at Pride Camp, and it is a camp. In my story, it's for the daddies, littles, and pets. And since we all know I love Polly, 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 this story features 1 daddy, 1 pet, and 2 littles. And it is so much fun to just write this fun, exciting camp where they can watch movies and have art time and play in the ball pit and just be fun and frolic and be themselves, whether they're little pet or what have you. The story is just all about having fun at camp as adults.
All right, Jenny. So let's dive in. What do we got?
We've got books 3 and 4 in the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series, which, like I said, is being re-released by Ginger Blue Publishing. So we've got a lot of rollicking science fiction adventure, steamy romance, heterosexual in this series. And basically, Kitty Cat is getting married in this book. And, love and marriage, here comes the baby carriage in book 4. But nothing's ever easy for Kitty. She is always having to stop horrible monsters arriving from outer space, intergalactic war, and the worst, most dangerous threat of all, politicians running wild.
Ms. Reyne.
Yep. So Atlas and the Traitor is book 3 in the Soltifine series, and this is basically if you took the Loma Prieta earthquake that hit San Francisco in the late 80s and flipped it and made it a magical event, and the things that happen and befall everybody afterwards. So nature and chaos are at war, and these two enemies find themselves having to save the world together. So it's enemies to lovers, and a lot of snark, a lot of fun.
Allie, how about for you?
So Hate to Haunt You, like I said, is book 2 in the Afterlife Incorporated series. Book 1 features Ember, who has recently died, but has discovered that the afterlife is a giant, slow-moving bureaucracy of understaffing and incompetence. And book 2 continues that theme, where Ember's Reaper sidekick, they discover that they are linked together at the soul, which sounds super romantic, but is in fact super toxic. And now Kelly, despite being an immortal Reaper, is dying. And no one at Afterlife, there's no afterlife hospitals, no afterlife first aid. No one really seems to know what to do. So it's a magical quest, little hurt comfort. And Ember hopefully saving the day.
Sammie?
All right. Well, Book Nemesis takes place in the modern world, and it is about a fan fiction writer who fake dates a convention volunteer, as in like a fandom convention volunteer, in order to get back at her ex who stole her story and published it under his name. So we've got revenge, we've got second chances, because she actually knew the other character beforehand. It is a 3 on the spicy scale, I would say. So also one thing I'm really proud of in this book is that, like my favorite show, Schitt's Creek, the 2 main characters are queer, and I made it normalized in this world. It was really important to me that there was an element of like, it's not a big deal that they're both bi.
So Mark, what brought around the idea of creating this collection of essays?
Well, a long time ago, I used to be a preschool teacher. I'm an academic now, and I teach children's literature. But when I was a preschool teacher and a daycare center worker, this is way back in the 1970s, which is before some of you were born. But I was working in the preschool, and I was fascinated by the way in which children play with toys and how they use toys as almost like a proto-language, in the sense the toys became characters in stories that they would make up right on the spot, or they would use toys as props and stories that they would tell, in which the toys became sort of like symbols for parts of the language that they might not actually have in terms of their verbal skills. So this book grew out of my fascination with the relationship between toys and stories. I worked with a collaborator of mine that we've done many books together, named Kathy Murlock Jackson. She and I went to graduate school together way back a long time ago. And she's interested in toys and stories as well. And so we contacted and we worked with scholars and toy researchers from around the world. But we actually, both Kathy and I, have our own essays. My essay in the book is about the actual Winnie the Pooh toys and how they ended up in New York City.
So let's dive a little bit deeper, like into some of the characters, right? Let's go a little bit deeper into the story, the characters, who we're going to be hanging out with, who we're going on the adventures with. And Layla, I'm going to start with you on this one. So who are we hanging out with as we go for this ride?
So we are hanging out with Axis, Ezzy, Roman, and Mac. His full name's Mackenzie. Mackenzie is, at the camp. He is a daddy. He has come there. It's his first, I'm checking this out type thing, not really fully believing it's as advertised. Ezzy and Roman and Axis were best friends growing up. They grew up in the same town. They always spent time together. They supported each other in the activities that they loved. Roman became a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. Axis is a guitarist in a band. And Ezzy is a playwright and a theater director. And about 8 years before the start of the story, some things happen and their friendship gets fractured. And as a result of that, Axis leaves without any goodbye. So not only is camp special for them because they get to be themselves, camp is the first time that Axis and Ezzy will be in the same place at the same time in 8 years. And neither one of them knows that this is going to happen when they are driving to camp. The actual setup for the book is that each character's drive to camp is their first chapter in the book. And the only person who knows what's about to happen is Roman, because he orchestrated it, all except for the Mackenzie part. Mackenzie is somebody who they'll meet at camp, but the three friends getting back together, that is all a Roman, and he's kind of driving up there worried this is about to blow up in his face.
So, Jenny, let's dive a little bit deeper into all the characters out of the Alien Kitty Cat series, right? Who are we going with in these books, and kind of where are they at this point in the story?
You do not want me to dive into all of them. This book is this is a 16-book series headed for at least 21. I have 500 named characters. Let's just talk about a couple. You don't want me talking about all of them. Kitty is the main character. This is a first-person POV series all the way through, so you see everything Kitty sees, know what Kitty knows, learn, figure out what Kitty figures out. She's very sarcastic. She's very snarky. Her parents pretty much raised her without telling her they were raising her this way, but they really raised her to think and react quickly and everything else. She's a high school and college athlete. She ran track. She's very smart, but she hides it. Her best male friend calls it protective coloration, where she pretty much can act like a ditz, even though she might be outthinking you. Add this into, she has an alien soon-to-be husband. The alien Jeff Martini is the head of field for Centaurian Division, which is a secret group of aliens that showed up in the 1960s because we had a bunch of space monsters arriving on planet Earth, and they came to protect and serve, at least as far as they knew at that time. Every book reveals more layers of conspiracies and more layers of lies and things like that. And book 3 is definitely shares a lot of that. In book 3, Alien in the Family, that's where Jeff and Kitty are getting married, and the path of true love is not running smooth. Everything is conspiring against this wedding coming off. In book 4, they are basically instantly pregnant. And the baby arrives with a massive amount of complications. One of the biggest things on these two books is they're the first introduction for readers into the fact that this series is set in a multiverse. In the first 2 books, you think Kitty's world is our world, and you start discovering that maybe it's not, because there are a lot of other multiverses out there, and Kitty's representing in a great number of them, but Kitty and Jeff are only together in this universe. So complications ensued later, but that's basically, this should be, hey, we're married, happily ever after. No, it does not run smoothly. But to reassure people who, people were like, do they stay together? Yeah, they do. Kitty does not change her mind. She's not changing horses midstream. So, Kitty and Jeff are together forever, and those Christopher fans, he's Jeff's cousin. He's also a hot alien. All the aliens that we mentioned from Alpha Centauri look like supermodels to humans. So they're all gorgeous. They have hyperspeed, 2 hearts, hyperspeed, fast regeneration, which is really great in the bedroom, which is why this is on the 1 to 5 spice scale. This is a 5. But Christopher, Jeff's the big, hunky, happy-go-lucky, cocky flirt. Christopher is the more slender, brooding jerk that I don't personally care for as a hero, which is why Jeff got the girl.
Ms. Reyne, who are we going on? Who are we going deeper into with this one? No pun intended.
So Atlas is a warlock, and for the first few books in the series, first couple books, you think he's the bad guy. He's an agent of chaos, and including Robin, who thinks he was responsible for his twin sister's death, which kind of sets up the enemies part of this equation. But by the time you get to the end of book 2, there's some clues that maybe things aren't what they seem. And then you get to book 3, and Atlas and Robin, who is a coyote shifter, have to work together basically to sort out, who was really responsible, and they know who it is, but to rein him in. And so, and stop the world from ending. But both are, it's grumpy and grumpier, basically. They've both got a lot of damage from a lot of losses. And so, there's a lot for them to work through individually and together, and how their lives have been toyed with by other people, and the misconceptions they have about each other as well, and kind of coming to understand, to trust, and to realize that neither one of them can be an island unto themselves, which is kind of how they've both operated for a long time, and fate's not letting that happen anymore.
Allie, how about for you?
So I mentioned the main character in the Afterlife series is Ember. When she was alive, she was a life coach, social media life coach, and then at the beginning of Only Mostly Dead, she died. And unfortunately, Death did not get her meeting invite, and so she got stuck in the suburbs of Toronto trying to find a route to the afterlife, and her only ally was an unemployed Reaper named Kelly, who, if Ember is like the can-do, go-getter, Kelly is the can't-do, don't wanna, don't make me. Kelly is unemployed, genderless, basically no identity, no purpose, just kind of floating around, and gets dragged unwillingly into this adventure. And now in book 2, things are still not moving swiftly at Afterlife, and then Kelly gets sick, which Ember previously was not aware was the thing that Reapers could do, and then more to the point discovers that she is the reason Kelly is sick. And so now they have to make some deals with some paranormal weirdos of questionable motivation. I ship them off to my hometown, where they meet the Leeds and Grenville Paranormal Investigation Society, which has a median age of 87. And generally, paranormal adventures, I think the thing that people really resonate with is the fact that Ember, despite being in this incredibly weird scenario, just keeps rolling with the punches, even when a lot of people would give up. Death is certainly not the way she expected, but, if anyone's going to keep punching her way through it, it seems to be Ember is the girl for the job.
Sammie?
Well, characters are my favorite thing out of everything to write. So, first we have Serenity Brooks. She is Filipino-American, and she's been taught pretty much her whole life just to be kind of silent, assimilation. I'm Filipino-American, so there's a little bit of authentic experience there, but she even changed her last name because she's like, I just want to fit in at first. She is coming off a bad breakup that left a lot of trauma for her. And it's been 2 years since this breakup, and she's still just getting to the point in therapy where she's like, okay, maybe I can actually write my own stuff now, because I've been writing fanfic forever, and she has a lot of hits. But the fanfic that she writes is in her ex's universe. And so she's like, shoot. So she finds out that she's just very emotionally not there at the beginning of the book. And she doesn't really know what she's going to do. She's lacking a lot of confidence at that point. she's nerdy, she's quirky, but she doesn't really know her worth at first. And then you have Ezra. Ezra is also dealing with trauma in a different way. So he's coming off a bad breakup as well, but he was engaged. And there was a video that went viral. He is also a playwright. And backstage, he ended up yelling at his fiance. He was under a ton of pressure at the time. She didn't know it, but he was fighting with his dad. And so somebody filmed it and it went viral and it completely wrecked his career. And even though it did wreck his career, he's starting to realize it's been 6 months since then and he's literally done nothing. And he's like, I have some issues with toxic masculinity. And it's like the first time he's ever considered it, even though his dad is very emotionally abusive and Ezra is half Hispanic, so his mom is Mexican. And so he runs this kind of weird balance between I am white, so my dad is well connected with everybody everybody in this universe, but also I don't want to be anything like him. And so he's dealing with some stuff, but he is very empathetic. And at the beginning of the book, he runs into Serenity at a cafe, and he just happens to be there meeting his cousin, and they actually knew each other in college. So Ezra was her ex's roommate, and so he remembers her, and she remembers him for a bad reason. He ghosted her because he told her, hey, Duval, the ex, he's a douche bag, and I want you to date me instead. And she said, nope, I'm not going to do that. And so he threw a fit and then ghosted her. So now he feels like already he's got stuff to atone for at that point. He, at that same cafe, Chloe, who is Serenity's girlfriend as well, her best friend, they all run into this guy named Duval K. Howard, which the most douchey of douche names, like Duval K. Howard. Anyway, so he is Serenity's ex, and he is a douchebag, and he is privileged. He has about 20% of redeemable qualities, but I wrote him intentionally to be the douchebag, basically. And he runs into Serenity, and he acts like nothing really happened. Like, he knows that he stole her story, but he has the gall to, first of all, show Ezra's video in front of Serenity just to make him look bad. And then he invites her to his signing because he's like, you helped inspire this book, you should come. And so Serenity's like, I hate everything. And so they end up going to the signing, and long story short, Oz, who's one of my favorite characters, Oz is Ezra's cousin, and he's like, look, man, I need you to go to these fandom conventions to promote this app. It's called Bookmate. I invented it. We have a bunch of sponsors, but we need more. It's a app that's based on dating. That's based on books, but instead of a normal dating app and being paired off like, their pictures or a different algorithm, it's based on the books that you like, or books that like people can start book discussions. And so he's like, look, I need you to do that. And so Serenity agrees to go with Ezra in order to promote herself as an author, but also to fake date and get back at Duval. And it's a really fun book. There's a lot of melodrama. Books are thrown, but not harmed. So it's just a lot of fun.
So, Mark, looking at the set of essays, and if this is your own essay, that's fine, but what is one of your favorite essays out of the collection? What is it about it? And, so what are a couple of the fun essays out of this that people will get?
Well, I think one of the essays that people would find interesting is the essay about the movie Barbie, which was a big hit a couple years ago. And that essay really explores how a toy became so meaningful to so many American girls, and then how the memories of that toy resonated throughout those girls' childhoods, teenage years, and into their adulthood. And the woman who wrote the essay did a really fine job of showing how the toy Barbie became something of an icon in American culture, and what that icon signifies in the context of definitions of women's roles in society. So I think that was a thoughtful essay, and one that, I love all the essays, of course. We put so much work into this project. So I thought that was really interesting. But then another essay, completely different, is all about Legos and how kids use Legos not just to build things, which is, of course, what we think of when we think of kids playing with Legos, but how in the process of building things, they're also creating stories. They use the Legos to, in some ways, create settings for the stories, or maybe even creating characters. There are Lego characters, as you probably know, Star Wars and other characters that are based on Legos. So it's there's so many different ways in which toys and stories interrelate in the context of this book, and we gave the contributors free rein. As long as it has something to do with toys and stories, have at it. So it's a wide range of essays. They're very accessible. They're not, I mean, everybody who's writing the essays is academic of one sort or another, but they're not stodgy academic essays. In many cases, people are writing about toys that they themselves have a deep affection for, maybe tied to their own memories of childhood experiences. There's essays about famous toys, dolls, and also puppets. There's a great essay about Pinocchio as a character and how he shows up in different movies, as well as in Carlo Collodi's book, and what is the character Pinocchio able to do as a puppet that would be different from what a flesh and blood character would do. How does his essence as a puppet affect the nature of his, essentially, I was going to say personality, because I guess it's a puppet allergy. It was a lot of fun to edit this book. The essay that I wrote was, of course, about the Winnie the Pooh toys. And that was such a sad and weird story about the relationship between Christopher Robin and his father, and how that played itself out in the context of these famous books, which I love, Winnie the Pooh and House of Pooh Corner and such. But how Christopher Robin, who was an actual person, grew to hate those toys and grew to hate those books and didn't want to have a damn thing to do with it. Does damn count as a word on your little wheel? So these are complex stories. They're not They're not just it's like, oh, a simple little story about a kid playing with a toy. In some ways, they become much more complex because the human imagination is complex.
So, Ellis, how about you? Let's dive a little bit deeper into who we're hanging out with on the waves, or who we get to throw in the surf. I'm not sure which yet.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
You're still on mute.
What's in the waves is what we have to worry about. Zeke and Ian are two young men, early 20s. They met as teenagers in a foster house where they both had ended up for various reasons. Having witnessed one of their other foster children being murdered rather brutally in the first book, they've decided that they can't do anything about human monsters, but they can do something about monsters, because this is a world in which we have vampires, werewolves, etc. So they're off tootling around, trying to eliminate some of these dangers. At the end of the case of Thistledown House, they finally have started a relationship beyond merely being best friends and partners. They've been best friends. They've been doing this hunting thing together. Each one has been pining, but doesn't want to say anything because they're best friends and they don't want to risk altering that friendship, losing that friendship. What if they are spurned? And they'll kind of just take what they can get. It's enough. But ultimately, there is a push comes to shove moment at the end of the first book that forces their hand into declaring their feelings. So here we are at the beginning of this second book, and they're very happy that they've found out that the feelings are reciprocated. So that part's great. But now they also kind of have to do this accommodation of like, oh, we're not just best friends and partners anymore. We're like in a relationship. You know, we have an actual romantic and sexual relationship blooming from our previous. And there are bumps in the road with that. It's not just like clear sailing right out of the gate. Having the feelings is the easy part, but now they have to actually cope with it all in day-to-day life while they're also doing this very stressful job of trying to find, what this monster is. So it's a new case. They're traveling to it. They get there. There's a mystery. Ian is kind of having, in the first book, kind of had these weird flashbacks. And I say weird flashbacks because it's things that happened in the past, but not to him. And in this book, he's experiencing something along those lines where he turns around and sees things that are not real, and then realizes nobody else is seeing them, but we're talking he sees it, he feels it, he smells it, he hears it, he's got all the senses going, and they know that something is going on with him, but in the meantime, they've got to get this monster dealt with. At one point where he's had one of these visions so viscerally that he has to go vomit because he just ate wings and beer and stuff, and then this gross thing happens and he can't deal with it. And he comes out and he's like, what the fuck is going on? What is happening here? Clearly, there's not just any run of the mill, because his senses are being affected, his, what he's experiencing is being affected. But they do, because they are intrepid young men, they will ultimately figure this out. But there's definitely excitement, there's danger, they meet a lot of interesting people along the way, get a little help here and there, and let's just say there might be a tentacle or two in that water.
So it's hentai. Okay. So
not that kind of tentacle.
Okay.
We
Just
all
thought
went
I'd
there,
ask.
girl.
Thought I'd
I'm
check.
sorry, we all went there.
So, looking at all the senses of story and everything else, part of the great joy of being a writer is getting to go in, create character, create story, all these moving pieces. But fundamentally, part of the great joy is that nature of how do we figure out who these characters are that we're creating and the process we go about to get to go torture them and run them through the ringer and, have all the fun with them that we do. So, Jenny, from that perspective, what did you kind of learn in terms of how you create your characters, what you loved, especially with the series that, as you say, has 12,493 characters and a quarter, because there's got to be a quarter character in there somewhere that hasn't been fleshed out yet. But, what is it for you in terms of that process, and what have you figured out both about how you go about creating the characters and what does that mean for you?
Well, Kitty was a gift, to be honest. For Touched by an Alien, I really felt like I was taking dictation to the point where when she introduces herself and she says, my name is, my name is Catherine, Cat, K-A-T-T, and before you ask, yes, my parents call me Kitty. I stopped writing. I turned away from the keyboard and went, Kitty Cat, seriously, Kitty Cat. And in my head, she replied, yes, my parents have a sense of humor, keep writing. I have stuff like that with her, really with every character all the way along. One of the joys of the Alien series is that I get to build on an existing group. If there's a song, and there's a lot of songs, so I'm very musically driven, and so is Kitty. Kitty gets by with a little help from her friends. Her friends are not drugs. Her friends are other people, humans and aliens. She has a really good ability to bring people in. She isn't aware there's a box, she's so far outside the box, we're not sure she knows there is a box. And her biggest strength is that she does not back down to power. Oh, are you stronger than her? Whatever. She's not backing down if you're wrong. Are you threatening an innocent person? she's not backing down. So she's uppity in that way. But it's a good thing. And as the series goes on, you find out why that's such a very good thing. But I like writing these characters because there are a lot of characters and I have to remember all of them. And what's fun is that a character that maybe you haven't even thought about for 8 books suddenly comes back with a vengeance. It's like, oh, yeah. I also like hiding little Easter eggs in for readers, particularly repeat readers, of which I'm very, very lucky to have a lot. In Alien Tango, which is in book 2, there's a throw-off joke where one of the major supporting characters, James Reader, makes a joke and says, maybe you're pregnant. And Kim's like, I'm not. She goes, besides, I think Jeff would know first if I was. That comes to fruition at the end of this book. So that's a payoff for readers who are paying attention. And I have Easter eggs like that strewn throughout the book. So I really enjoy it. It is soft science fiction, but I am a mystery girl from the get-go. So every book has a mystery. I'm actually building a mystery structure. And there is something that they have to solve. There's something they have to fix. They have to find who's the bad guy, who's behind what, who's behind this, who's behind that, which lets me have the mystery portion without having to sacrifice the rest of it. So I enjoy the build, if you will, that I know each book I'm going to get to add more layers to each character that's around. In book 3, in Alien, the family, you discover that Reader is from Vegas. And you don't know that. Kitty didn't know it. So if Kitty didn't know it, you don't know it. Or if Kitty never felt it was something to comment on, you don't know it. So that was a fun expanse on a character and everything else. So by the way, the black booth is indeed named for her. Yeah, Moose Moose. This is my fluffy duck who mommy's at the computer, so she has to prevent me from working. That's her entire goal every time I sit down to work. Oh, are you sitting? Pet me, pet me. And that's in there. There are a lot of animals in the Alien series too, because I love animals and so does Kitty. So Kitty is not me. I get a lot of, oh, Kitty is you. They're all me. They're all me, especially the villains. And people should really take a note on that because especially the villain.
So, Ms. Reyne, how about for you? What is it for you in terms of characters and how you come about them and how much of it is you?
I mean, I typically write romantic suspense, right? I have some contemporary, and anytime you see foodie stuff in books, that's me. That's 100% me. But I think one of the things I've always loved watching romantic suspense in film or TV and reading it is the surprise. Right. I love wait, that's who that was. Right. Or that's how that was going. Like, if you can fool me, that's great. Like, I'm the happiest reader or watcher in the world. And so a lot of that plays into my books. And I think with this series in particular, adding the paranormal element, I could just amplify that even more, which was great. And kind of they build, there's all of these books. These books have some hidden identity, mistaken identity, secret identity kind of, be it even to themselves, right, aspect of it. And then when you get to this last book, Atlas isn't at all what he seemed. And Robin is just figuring out what he is, unbeknownst to him, right? And that was kept from his entire life. And so there's a lot of that at play, and even to the point that in writing it flipped at the end to what I thought it was going to go one way, and it ended up being the other character that took on this role because I was still discovering it, and it surprised me. And that's always fun. For as much of a plotter as I am, and Allie can tell you that, I also enjoy being surprised by my own characters.
How about for you, Allie? How does it come about for you with characters?
Excuse me, I have cat hair in my mouth. I can't imagine. I am very much a Cancer. Layla and I don't understand each other deeply. Usually it starts for me with like one little quirk, one little character trait. So for Ember, in her living life, it's very complicated to describe these things when most of your book has a cast that's totally dead. But in her living life, she was a social media life coach who made content, and here's how you're going to live your best life. And so she has an online community called The Sparks. You're going to light your spark. And so she, particularly in the first book, when she wants to sort of convey information quickly, she starts like she's speaking to the sparks. So, dear sparks, here's what I found out about being dead. And the dear sparks thing came to me fairly quickly in Ember's character arc. On the other hand, Kelly is very much, I think in the first book they described Kelly as like a feral cat who just followed them home one day and now wants to be fed and wants, a quiet place to nap and play video games. Clearly, I have no idea what that's like at all. But otherwise can barely be bothered to acknowledge the other people living in the house with them. Kelly is definitely the keeper of the slow blink. Like, their reactions are so muted and subdued, they can't even be bothered to blink quickly. And so Kelly and their slow blink and their sort of terminal disdain for everybody was the jumping off point for that character. And then he just sort of let it go. Ember, as it turns out, has very much, from the beginning of the first book, has decided that she's on this journey by herself. I mean, it is really a journey through Ember's death and grief. And so she is on this journey by herself and trying to solve problems on her own. And it's only when we get to book 3, in fact, that she realizes that she needs to accept the help of the rest of the motley crew that she's put together. But that wasn't something that was really intentional from the beginning, other than, death is lonely. And ultimately we all go through death by ourselves, and Ember's no different than that. So it just sort of happened organically because that was the starting point for the story. And this is Mango. Mango is the main character in every story, if you'd ask him. So, he doesn't need character arcs. That is his character arc.
Well, cats have automatic plot armor.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Sammie, especially seeing as how this was your debut novel,
Yes.
what'd you learn in terms of characters and maybe something about yourself as well?
Ooh. So I am a really meticulous plotter, and I actually use a program called Plotter, spelled Plottr. So I make like character profiles, slideshows. They each get their own playlist. But the biggest difference, I think, a couple things. What I learned about myself, and then also just my process. Number one was the way that I look at characters changed when I started studying Eastern storytelling. So my background is in fantasy, actually, and one of the first projects that I ever wrote was a retelling of an Eastern format fantasy fairy tale. And ever since then, I've just been obsessed with it. Like, I remember going to Google and typing in Eastern fantasy or Eastern folktale or something. And it wasn't until the 6th page of Google that they gave me an actual thing. And I'm like, what? And so, it was all Western. So ever since then, I've been watching a lot of anime. My partner is really into Eastern storytelling as well. So he's given me a lot of resources. And they shape their characters so differently. I've been watching K-dramas and, like I said, anime, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, but it hits differently. A lot of it is their themes. Like, their themes are very like internal based. And so when I started realizing that, combined with the way that I write characters is very much from their motivation. Like, I want to know what is it that they want and why are they lacking it right now? And I like to ask questions. So if I know, for example, that Serenity was dealing with self-confidence, I'm like, well, why? Like, why is she dealing with that? And then even deeper, like, okay, so she's dealing with that because she has an ex. Okay, why did she let him do that? So I just keep going down the rabbit hole until they speak to me. And then I had a really good friend who, she's already a published author for several years, and she was like, you should do your creative person, like, write your characters letters and then let them write back to you. And so I'm like, at first I was just like, that's weird. I'm not going to do that. And then I did it, and it revealed a lot to me, actually. So I liked that. What I learned about myself, though, is the themes that were coming up for these characters, they did have a lot of me inside of them, especially Serenity. I have dealt with sexual assault and some really emotionally abusive people in my life. And it was one of those times where, honestly, I didn't remember most of my trauma until I was 28. I know I look like I'm, 20, but I am in my 30s now. And so because of that, I had a really hard time processing. Like I was raised a very specific way with specific mindsets, and I didn't like what it said about me and all these things. And so I've been in therapy for years now trying to process this. And I started writing this actually as a way to combat the pandemic, because I was writing a really heavy fantasy that was dealing with grief and war and like all these heavy, heavy themes. And so for Nano that year, I was like, you know what? No, I'm gonna write a romance. I need some happiness in my life. And it ended up being, her arc was very similar to mine, and it was so cathartic. And I remember just sitting there being like, oh, maybe I'm more healed than I thought. Her friend actually says to her, she's like, maybe you need to step out of your healing era and step into your queen era. And so it's a story about self-empowerment, and I had to go there. I think that's one thing I learned about myself is I consider myself a very authentic person, but even though I am an open person and I usually will answer questions if people ask me, I have a hard time being really vulnerable like that on the page. And I feel like until I was able to break through that, that's one of the reasons I didn't write novels, or I was querying forever, and I got full manuscript requests, and they're always like, you're just a little bit off. Like there's something here that you haven't gone in depth for yet. So I think that's the biggest thing I took away from it, is like I have to like actually let myself go there emotionally in order for people to be able to connect with these characters.
So, Mark, looking at the collection of essays, and you kind of mentioned earlier how toys take on that sense of character, and how that sense of play develops character, especially as toys are going along. So, as you went through these essays, what did that tell you in terms of how these help develop that sense of character in the toys they're playing with? But what does that also mean for the kids that are playing with them?
Well, I think for a lot of kids, toys become something they can project themselves on to some degree. One of the things that you'll see, if you've worked with children or have had children, you might be aware sometimes the kid will say, I have a friend who's having problems with his teacher. But you know damn well that it's not the friend, it's the kid himself or herself that's trying to create a little bit of distance. And that same mechanism sometimes works with the way in which kids play with toys. There will sometimes, in the whole field of play therapy, which isn't something we deal a lot with in this book, but it shows up, is one of the things that happens in play therapy is that through play, children are sometimes able to express emotions or how they feel about things in terms of things they might have some anxiety about by putting it onto a toy. So the alligator is very angry right now, but really it's not the alligator at all. It's the child, but in some ways by making it the alligator that says it, then maybe it's, you don't feel like you're going to be reprimanded for saying something. So toys, when kids play with toys, and if you pay close attention to how they play with the toys, you kind of get insights into the world, into their inner world. What are they thinking? What are they concerned about? How are they processing things? So one of the ways in which you all have been talking about is how you might use words and stories to work through your own concerns. Several of you have mentioned that already. But for a child who doesn't really have that full range of words, a vocabulary that rich, they need some other way in which they can express those feelings and thoughts. And one of the ways they can do that is by creating characters that happen to be toys, that they can then use that toy as a way to kind of articulate or play through, or maybe in some ways work through some of their concerns. When I was a preschool teacher at one point, there was the mother was late coming to pick up her kid, and so this little girl was the last kid being picked up, and the mother had called, and I said I'd stay late, of course. I'm not going to leave a kid by herself in the school. So I gave the little girl some toys to play with while she was waiting, and she was anxious. Where's my mom, and why am I the only kid that's not being picked up? And so she had a little toy car, and she built a little building out of some blocks, and she called it the school. And then I heard her talking. If you listen to kids, they'll oftentimes talk or provide a narrative while they're playing with the toy. And the girl took the car and she said, here comes the mommy to pick up her girl. Here comes the mommy to pick up her daughter. And she didn't say girl or daughter, but the pushing the car to the school and kind of playing out the scenario that was something she was thinking about gave her a sense of control. Now I understand why is my mommy late? And my mommy, in fact, is coming. And see, here she is in the car, and she's going to be here. And she would play that out. She played out that scenario over and over and over and over again until our real mommy actually showed up. But playing with the toy gave her an opportunity to express the concerns that were going on inside of her mind. And by just sitting there and giving her the opportunity to do that, I kind of gained access into what was it that she was worried about.
So Ellis, how about for you? What'd you learn in terms of developing your characters?
So in the previous book, because I was exploring the fact that these characters were undergoing this dangerous investigation, but also had all these feelings that they didn't dare confess to each other. In this book, it was really fun to be like, okay, it's out in the open now. I love you, you love me, la, 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 but yet have them experience, oh, this is great. And now let's, have a little looky and whatever, but like, oh, here's this thing that I didn't think was a problem when we weren't in a relationship. But you know what? In a relationship, now that really bothers me. Being flirtatious with somebody because you're trying to get information from them. And so you're being like, very sweet to them and stuff. And while the other person may be really familiar that this is one of the things you do, all of a sudden is seeing that in a new light and is like, hey, I'm not cool with that now. So they had to find out new things about themselves as they're in these new roles. And that's always interesting, to explore. I think one of the things they started really learning, they both come from these very lonely childhoods. And they're, in different foster homes and stuff. And when they finally had met as foster children in the home where they had ended up, certainly learned that they were stronger together. They could share their fears and their hopes and all of that. So they had learned that, and now they're learning it more deeply. But they're learning it kind of under the gun because stuff is happening around them that's really dangerous. And so you kind of have to be upfront with things because you know what? Something could go south and you're not going to get a chance to tell them that. So they kind of have to seize these opportunities to show each other how they feel. I mean, you can say, I love you, but you also need to show them. You need to have some action and to back that up and say, you're important to me, your comfort's important, your happiness is important. At one point, they live really kind of scrabbly lives. It's not like they have a lot of money and they don't get paid for this monster stuff and everything. And one of them says, you know what? I want to take you out for a fancy dinner. I want us to have like a real date. And let's get dressed up and we'll go someplace fancy and all this stuff. And that's a new experience for them. but it was really important to him to show his now partner that he was really worth that, and he was valuable, and he deserved to get nicely treated like that and everything. So there's all these kinds of new explorations for them as people. As far as the case stuff goes, well, I love paranormal stuff, and I love horror, and I love suspense, and I love having the suspense of the mystery itself, and especially if I can get some horror in there too. So I try, because it's a romance, I'm not writing something that's so dark, like they're hanging by their fingernails on a cliff and then they fall and, they have to get put back together. But there's a lot of horror that can be experienced and spookiness that can be explored. And I really enjoy building that. That's something I like to create, and then throw my people in there and say, good luck. Let me know how that works out for you. So it's all of it. I enjoy writing both aspects. And I do like to think that I'm writing a story with a romance and not exclusively a romance story, if that makes sense. The focus isn't solely on the relationship, but it's equally on the relationship and what's happening in the world around them. And so those two things dovetail, and that's important to me to have too, because neither one doesn't do a mystery in a vacuum and one doesn't do a romance in a vacuum. You have to integrate all of it, and I really like to do that.
So, Miss Dorine, let's bring it home. And knowing that you've developed a lot of your stories, a lot of your characters through RPGs over the years, knowing all the different ways that you've gone and built, what is it about how you and your characters, interact, how you develop them, how they come about for you?
For this story, I just drew on all the years of going to summer camp when I was in high school and all the things that I loved about it. And the fact that, I don't go camping as much now, and I wish I could, but there's no place that I've found so far that is like what we tried to create with the campground stories, where it's just camping for adults. And, adults get to have the climbing wall, and adults get to use the zip lines, and it's just an adult playground. And I've kind of written into a few of my stories too about having why don't we have the water park open from 7 to 10 where it's adults only and you can just float around the lazy river and chill listening to music. It's created to be fun for the adult characters. And so I tried to think of different things that they would actually enjoy. And there's a botanical garden type maze. So you can wander the garden and there's all these cool plants and everything, but it's still a maze, like a labyrinth. So kind of like a corn maze, but there's tons of plants and flowers and fountains and places to sit, and you can wander the maze and see if you can figure your way out. But there's also things to be inspired by if you're creative, like some of my characters are. So they go to the maze to sit and write and watch the butterflies and the dragonflies and just be undisturbed by, there's no children running through the maze, screaming and scaring all the birds and the bees away. It's all for adults. And that was part of the fun of it. It was let me idealize something that I would love to see more of out there. And then just, of course, taking romance and putting it with it. I really thought it was only going to be 3 characters, and I started writing the first 3 chapters, and I'm like, there's just something missing. So I went out and I was driving along the dirt roads, just cruising along, and was like, I just can't figure out what's missing. I have the radio cranked up, and I'm like, oh, I'm 1 character short, and he finally popped into my head as I've got a dust trail behind the car, and music blaring, and it's like, oh, I've got two musicians in this story, not one. One is an older musician, and one is a younger one who's like still kind of trying to find his footing. So in a way, Mac ends up connecting with each character in a different way. And that became so much fun when I finally started hearing Mac's voice in my head was, oh, like, okay, he has something in common with each of the characters. He's got a way of touching base with the characters and making each one feel special. And each one gets a super cute, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, telling you what nicknames they are because they appeared throughout the book. But over the course of the book, each character earns from him their own very special nickname. He's out there playing sharks and minnows with them in the giant water ball pit. So instead of having the little tiny plastic balls, it's a ball pit in the lake, and it's beach balls everywhere. And they just get to like play with all the beach balls and play sharks and minnows and hide among the beach balls and, crouching down in the water with the beach ball in front of your face and hoping you're not getting, going to get found or tagged or anything like that. And they're playing flashlight tag in one of the scenes in the woods. Of course, they did get drenched in the process because the storm rolled in, but they're chasing fireflies and playing the sprinkler and just having a blast because, of course, I've got two littles in the story. So just getting to write really fun scenes like that. This is a super fluffy, maybe a 2 on the angst scale book, not much angst at all. It's all about the fun of being at camp and reconnecting with old friends and enjoying themselves.
Well, we've got a lot of stuff to stack on that to be read pile, but let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. Website, social media, and of course the book they need to be going out and picking up. So, Ms. Colton, you're up first. And you're on mute.
I don't often mute, so I forget when I am. All my stuff, social media links, newsletter, everything is at elliscolton.com. And both The Case of Thistledown House, which is book 1, and now The Malevolent Sea, which went live today, book 2, are available at Amazon.
Ms. Dorine?
You can find me at Layla Dorine, author at Wix.com, Rainbow Lyrics and Mellow Mushrooms, all over Facebook. I'm trying to do more with Instagram and TikTok. A Little Campfire Blues will be out on the 27th of June. Most of the Pride Camp series is already out, so check out all the books in the series because we all endeavor to bring you a really cool camp experience with each of our books, and all of the books are in KU.
Jenny?
GiniKoch.com. If you want to sign up for my free newsletter, hook me up. You can do so from the bottom of most of the pages of that website. I'm all over Facebook, X, Twitter, Blue Sky, and Pinterest. And Alien in the Family and Alien Proliferation are books 3 and 4 in the Alien series, like I said, being re-released by Gingerly Publishing. And you can find them at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Apple Books. And anywhere I'm live.
Ms. Reyne?
Yep, I'm online at LaylaReyne.com, including a direct store, and all of my socials are at Layla Reyne. The book is Atlas and the Traitor. It also released today, wide, all outlets, and direct. And for the remainder of the month, book 1 of the series, Icarus and the Devil, is free for ebook.
Allie?
You can find me both website and social media, all AllisonTempleBooks.com, or not the .com on social media, but Allison Temple Books. The book today was Hate to Haunt You, which is book 2 in the Afterlife Incorporated series. So you haven't read book 1, it's called Only Mostly Dead. And that is available direct on my website, both in ebook and signed paperbacks, or you can buy it anywhere you buy those ebooks and paperbacks.
Sammie?
All right, you can go to my website, which is SammieTrinidadCreates.com, with Sammie spelled Sammie. On that website, if you sign up for my newsletter, you can have access to a free short story that we're giving away, book 2 is coming out. Book 2 and 3 will come out this year of the same series. So you can get updates on that through that newsletter and updates of this guy named Link. He's a chunk. And then his sister Zelda, who's a dog. And then I am mostly on Instagram and TikTok. TikTok more than Instagram, but it's just Sammie Trinidad Creates. You can find me there. I'd love to interact with you. Oh, also, actually, I do want to announce this too. So I'm going to a lot of conventions this year. This month, we're doing a signing in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia. It's called SAS Signing at the end of the month. And then we'll also be at Lit RPG Con, which is in Colorado in July. And then Dragon Con, which we go to every year. And we have a few others that are scheduled in Dallas that are local events. Hope to see you there.
Mark? Where can we find you?
In keeping with my peculiarities, I don't do social media, but I do write a blog. And it's called Storied Charlotte for like Jim and anybody else who has connections to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I live. I write a weekly blog, which is all about the community of readers and writers in Charlotte. And you just type in Storied Charlotte and it pops up. In terms of Once Upon a Time, the collection I've been talking about today, it's available on Amazon and the other outlets. I'm proud to announce that Amazon has listed it as a hot new release. So it's always fun when a book gets that distinction. I don't know. It's a temporary thing. You never know how long you're going to be a hot new release before you become a lukewarm release. But at the moment, it's a hot new release. So it's called Once Upon a Toy. And if you want to find my other books, I have many books. You should put in my Mark I. West, because there are a lot of Mark Wests out there besides me, including a bottle of wine. So most people who type in just Mark West will come up with the Mark West Winery, which I will endorse. I like it, but I have no connections to it. But Mark I. West, you'll find all my books. I am the only Mark I. West in the world. So there you go. Thanks.
And you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, creatingpros.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we'll go see you again soon, and go stack up those to-be-read piles.